When you take a look at the painted work, it's so colorful, you're blinded like by a car coming at you. Never a good thing. So I redraw the designs, and by drawing, I go through the artistic process as the artist would have. And one thing I realized is they're much better artists than I could ever be. They're doing it by hand. I'm using Illustrator, an Adobe digital product. I'm not paid by Adobe. But I am a digital artist, and I know these programs. And I know that they give me all kinds of advantages in doing art. But the Egyptians are still better than I'll ever be, even with Adobe Illustrator. And they're using their bare hand, and they are such an elegance of line, such a beauty that they're doing with their bare hand without going over the line twice, no eraser, no correction, no new file in digital format. They had to get it right practically the first time, and they do it. And I want to point out there are 3 zones. And when you begin to divide up the vignette, you begin to see the differences through time that have crept in, and those differences are the hallmarks or the mint marks of different artists. We can see in this report zone on the left that, again, it is Horace who does the presentation, the report about the weighing. The beast is a pet at the foot of the god. But in the zone which I call the entry zone, you have a great emotional reaction. It's almost a reaction zone. I've been justified. I can get in. And this is something which we take for granted, but it is not true of all the scenes. So if we go back to a coffin from Akhmim, and I hope this is clear enough for you to see, we see that the weighing of the heart is very different in this scene. There's no ibis-headed Thoth. It's a baboon. The baboon is on a plinth or a pedestal, which is in the shape of the hieroglyph for truth, Ma'at. And is this a creation of an artist of around 900 BC or 875 BC? Question. And the answer is no, it's not. Here's the scene enlarged. The baboon is doing the report. It's not what I was taught. I particularly like the image of the beast as a dog because I own a small dog, and I love this animal, I really do, but it's a beast. But this has something to do with the culture of the period in which the coffin was made. The dog was the conceptualization of the beast idea, no longer the crocodile. Another coffin from Akhmim, and again, the beast is not a crocodile, but is some sort of hybrid blending of dog and hippo. Now we know that the back legs of the beast should be the part which is the hippo, but it has been changed by the artist based upon information that the artist had and a different way of viewing a religious idea. A coffin from an Italian collection in Asti, which was shown to me for the first time by Dr. Malgora. And again, you can see this beast is not a crocodile, but some sort of hybrid animal, part dog, part hippo, grabbing onto the scale. And I looked at this text many times and thought I understood it, and then looked again and said, my gosh, the text says, the destroyer of multitudes. And I thought that that was a a caption explaining what was going on in the scene, in the vignette, but it's actually the name of this animal. It's not even the same goddess that you see in the earlier papyri. In other words, there is a regional version of the Devourus, the crocodile-headed beast, which in Akhmim and in other portions of northern Upper Egypt has the head of a dog-like animal mixed with a hippopotamus. Here is a Theban product, and it's one very similar to one that's in the Turin collection. And we can see Theban work. This actually is the oldest, or the first coffin to come into the United States, the coffin of Petty Hershef, 1823. What's interesting is that this coffin came to the United States and ended up in Boston, but it went through Livorno first. Livorno is this just random, or do we have an artist who works with a very wet brush and enjoys working with a wet brush? And we find a completely different coffin, also Theban. But again, you can see clearly that it's done by an artist who likes to work with a very wet brush. It's the beginning of a signature to the discovery of an individual, a single artist who liked to work in a particular way. And this is the way coffins should be looked at and perhaps classified, in a way akin to the way we look at Greek pottery, the so-and-so potter. That idea. Artist A, I've discovered artist A. Oh, do you have another example of the work of artist A? Artist B? All of a sudden, it becomes historical. You can talk about trade patterns, purchase and sale, and this kind of question becomes historical, not just archaeological. Another Theban coffin, and again, the importance of looking at small details. It's a very small image, I'm sorry, but you can see already you don't need a large image after a while. So if you're looking at just a book that is handed to you and you're interested in the question, you can say that the beast is looking over its shoulder, backward. My gosh. It belongs to this tradition of manufacture, not some other tradition. Just a small detail can do that. And eventually it becomes a table where you systematically map it out, the different zones of the weighing of the heart, and whether the beast turns its head or not, whether it holds a knife in its hand or not. And this becomes interpretive. You can take this to the next level of historical research. I mean, it's endless. I've begun the work. It can go on for, I won't say 10 years, but certainly another year. We'll learn much more from this kind of approach. Breaking down the design, segmenting it, following the route of the artist using Adobe Illustrator, finding out how difficult it is to do that gives you an insight into the process that the artists faced, whether they knew what they were doing, whether it was difficult. We have to get away from statements which are too frequently found in Egyptological literature where people discuss the fact that the artist made mistakes and didn't care and didn't know what they were doing. This is dismissive and damaging to our science. We have to go in the other direction. We have to experience the difficulty ourselves, and then we take ourselves off a pedestal and realize that these artists are talented people working under difficult conditions often. The example I want to finish with, because I know that we are perhaps running out of time, and I don't want to keep you over long. Okay. I'm the kind of speaker who can speak for 4 hours if necessary, so I'd like to gauge things properly. Or 40 minutes. It's a fascinating field. Take my word for it. It is fascinating once you begin to see things. You begin to see that a lot of the material that we associate with Thebes could well have come out of a different tradition. But I just don't want to say that a tradition, an artistic style, is simply a style. That style is the imprint of an actual religious idea that may have existed in a particular region. And I hope you can make out in this image the beast. Can you see the beast? I think you're familiar enough with the weighing of the heart scene to be able to see that without me pointing it out. We see that she is wearing a diadem with tall plumes. She's holding a knife. In another case, we have the fetish of Abydos on a different style of coffin, but again, very high up on the coffin. Very high up, though the style is different because we are talking about a much later period. But it's the fetish of Abydos, it's positioned very high, and we know that this coffin comes from Akhmim. It's in the British Museum. Now returning again to the form of the beast, the diadem with the 2 plumes has been placed on the head of the beast. The beast holds the knife. This, by the way, is the image that was on the advertisement for this talk. It is on a beautiful Saite or 26th dynasty coffin in Tacoma, Washington, which is not usually on display, but it is as beautiful as any of the best coffins of the period found anywhere. But we can see that this beast wears the double plume, and I began to wonder whether this was again a feature which was introduced by the artist out of an imagination at that moment, or was it from some earlier source? And I realized, though I did not include the image in preparation for this talk, I was a bit hasty, but I can now verify that this is an image of Taweret herself. It's the only other deity which has the form of a beast, which will wear that diadem with the 2 plumes and hold a knife. So in a sense, what it revealed to me was the image of the devouress, Amit, or the variant from Akhmim, the destroyer of multitudes, is a form of the birth goddess. So it opens up a symbolic awareness of the meaning of the weighing of the heart. It's not just a beast that is fed the heart of the unjust. That beast is the other side of the goddess of birth. And it is the goddess of birth who will devour you in the end if you are unjust in any way. This is even more frightening than we could ever imagine. It's not just a beast that's always there. It is really a form of mother goddess that takes you away and essentially is the instrument of your destruction should the weighing not take place in the proper way. Should you be found wanting in the hall of Ma'at, if you are a sinner, you are destroyed by the goddess who would have been responsible for your rebirth. You don't get to be reborn is really the meaning of that, not just destruction. I think it is a delicate nuance, but I think it's an important one. And it may explain the movement over time throughout the third intermediate period into later times of a religious idea which was meant to be even stronger than it ever was before. The beast is no longer a pet at the foot of Thoth. The beast is on her own, determining whether you get reborn or not. In a sense, the goddess of birth becomes the greatest judge. And that's what you see being expressed on these coffins. I would like to thank all those institutions that supplied photographs for this presentation. And if there's time for questions, if I can clarify anything that I've said, I'd be pleased to do so at this time.
Thank you. Thank you for these inspiring lectures, and especially teaching us to look for details. What you were saying about Greek pottery is something I think you're absolutely right. What Beasley has done with Greek pottery maybe is what we should do with Egyptian coffins, trying to identify different workshops and to put them in relation to identify different artists who left their signs and their signatures, even though sometimes we are not able to read them and to identify them. And also you are completely right in saying that way too often we just say, ascribe to mistakes or to the Egyptian, just things that we do not understand. And I remember when I was studying the Coffin of Angkor in Leiden, I found, and I was studying the disposition of the lunette in the Caruso coffins, which that doesn't match. And then you just look up in the literature and we just, in the late period, the Egyptian did not know what they were doing, which is something, you put a sick and you think, how is it possible? And then sometimes it's even important, that's something that we have to do. I mean, all of us who have the luck to work in a museum, to look into life and to find some answers. So for instance, I discovered that when that coffin in 1826 arrived in Leiden, the director himself decided to put all the pieces together, and he wrote in the letter he could not delegate any of his stuff for this delicate thing. And then it turns out that the coffin arrived in pieces and he put them together. So maybe the one who did not understand the iconography was the director, not the Egyptian. So,
perfect.
having said that, we also share this love for Livorno, but I did go there. And I must tell you, I was kind of disappointed because as you said very rightly, at least European started there, everything arrived there. And of course also the collection on Leiden, which was the curator, arrived in Livorno, and the Consul General of the Netherlands said it was a brilliant Egyptologist going around in Livorno, Ippolito Rossellini, and we wanted to show him the collections, but then I found a letter where it was written, don't ask him, he's a good friend of Champollion, we shouldn't trust those friends. But I went to Livorno because in Leiden we have the Chimba collection, and I wanted so much to see the archive, but the archives are gone. Part of them are being destroyed in the Second World War. So, but if you go to Livorno after the 1st of April, I might join you to see in search of archive, because this is, you're right, it's the hub, at least, of European Egyptology. Well, I'm sure that there are questions of people dealing with coffins, and I would like to leave the floor to them.
About the original of the coffin, I'm very curious on position and iconography of the monster Amemita. So, and there was also in the 70s a scholar named Siebert who was changing of the piece for thieves.
Absolutely.
So I will. because you showed some scenes that are very, very similar to the Turin one. So it will take a lot of time to say some, and someone here may be bored about this discussion, but I wanted to say that we have here in Turin a lot of hybrid monsters with the head turned, with knives, with the feathers on the head that can interest very much you too. Thank you very much for
Thank you. Thank
very
you.
interesting lectures.
Thank you. No, no.
Do you have any other questions or remarks?
If I could respond briefly to what you've said. My position is not that, thank you. My position is not to turn everything that exists into a product of Akhmim. Yeah, not at all, not at all. And in fact, and I know you understand this, this is exactly what we don't want to do. It is an oversimplification of what is actually happening. And we have to remain aware of the possibility that you have many different things going on. You have education. Where were the artists educated? You have the whole notion of Musterbuch, where you have the copy, which is on papyrus, being distributed, and they're working from, this is all hypothetical, because none of these have been found directly. But the whole notion was that there was a loose leaf notebook in ancient Egyptian terms filled with different designs, and that in the artistic workshop, the atelier, they would turn part of this notebook, a page would be turned, and I'm going to do this design today. I'm bored with the other design, I'm going to do this one. You know, this is also a possibility, but it's just one of perhaps, I will say, 24 different possibilities. Because one thing is true does not make everything else false. So we may have a situation where a number of different things are occurring. As I said earlier, you could have an Akhmimic artist working in Thebes. You can have Akhmimic material shipped to Thebes for sale. At the same time, you can have Theban material shipped northwards to Akhmim. And I think this really happened. For example, the coffin from Tacoma, as far as we know, was purchased in Luxor, even though it's for a priest of Min, whose very titles show that he worked in Akhmim. The coffin was purchased in Luxor. So do we suppose that when it was excavated, probably illicitly, it was shipped south to Luxor for sale to a tourist? Or do we suppose that this individual of Akhmimic origin who worked in Akhmim was buried in Thebes? And both things can happen. In the group of coffins known as the Priest of Mantu group, we have many, not many, but several coffins of people who worked in the northern part of Upper Egypt, but their coffins were retrieved from Thebes. So we know that some of the Theban families had members who were living in other cities, just as in Italy today or in the United States, our closest relatives are in a different town. Why would ancient Egypt be any different? And again, you know, my point, and I'm sure you understand this better than collection at least, and that you lived out your life in Thebes, and this is not the case. It goes against reason to suggest that no one ever moved or even temporarily relocated. So you could have people of Theban birth buried in Akhmim, or Akhmimic birth buried in Thebes, or any of the other cities, for that matter. And this is what we have to remain open to. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for your inspiring lectures, and thank you for being here. domanda e volevo annunciare i nostri prossimi incontri. Il prossimo sarà il 1° dicembre, torneremo ad usare la nostra lingua, ci sarà il professor Cultraro da Catania, ricercatore del CNR, che ci parlerà delle relazioni fra l'Egitto e il Mediterraneo, con particolare riferimento alla nostra collezione e alla produzione di ceramica su commissione, quindi produzione mediterranea che viene poi importata in Egitto. E poi il 15 dicembre spero davvero di vedervi numerosi, perché abbiamo l'onore di ospitare il Presidente del Consiglio Superiore dei Beni Culturali, professore Giuliano Volpe, che ci fa l'onore di venire a tenere una conferenza sulla gestione dei beni culturali e sul ruolo che il nostro museo in particolare in questo ha. Vi ringrazio e spero di vedervi nei prossimi